Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show that explores all things essence. And I'm really delighted today. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and I'm really delighted today to invite with us Elsbeth Meuth and Freddy Zental. Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you.
you. Thanks, Carrie.
Elsbeth and Freddy have assisted thousands of couples and singles to create lasting intimacy and fulfillment in their relationships. They are featured on Showtime's documentary series, Sexual Healing, and the Emmy Award-winning NBC show Starting Over. They're also best-selling authors of Sexual Enlightenment, which is endorsed by world-renowned spiritual pioneer Dr. Michael Beckwith. And they're co-founders of TantraNova Institute in Chicago. I love Chicago. So pushed lots of people, including billionaires and innovators and power couples all over the world, to share their intimacy secrets. So I'm really excited today because, this is such an important part of healing is being able to be sexually intimate, not only with your partner, but with yourself. And it's definitely a kind of awakening. I know I've had my own awakening, my sexual revolution. I think I shared some of that with Elsbeth, and we'll talk a little bit about it today. But tell me about your journey, because, one of the things I love about this show is that the concept of Soul Nectar is that we're all sort of sitting around the campfire and sharing our heartfelt stories of our journeys with each other, because we all learn and grow by hearing each other's stories. So how did you guys are experts today, but you didn't just walk out of the crate, I know all about sexual revolution and I know how to enlighten this way. You didn't walk out that way. So tell us a little bit about your journey in that regard.
Yeah, so we have very opposite upbringings. And it's just really, do you want to start with yours and then I come in?
Yeah, sure. That's what we usually do.
Great.
So coming into this work that we teach now, I was 13 years old, living in Hawaii, and I was just coming into my puberty at 13. And my father was a practicing psychiatrist and very enrolled in his own transformation and new approaches to seeing things. And he gave me a book to read on how to integrate. I was spending a lot of time in the shower, just going through my puberty. He probably thought I was going to hurt myself in there. So he gave me a book to read on how to integrate meditation and sex practices. And that was my first venture into integrating meditation and sex practices as a way to get more deeply connected to what I was creating in my life. At the time, I was an athlete, and my girlfriend loved the sex part of it and all of that. And also, I was able to focus more on my athletics and my academics, and I was able to get into college on an athletic scholarship. And anyway, I kept doing these practices after college and applying it in my personal relationships, and wound up in the software business as a profession for many years. And initially it was very exciting for me, but after about 15 years, it became just a job. So I was looking for a reinvigoration of my own in meaning to life. So I took a job. I was in San Francisco at the time. And I took a job with a company in Chicago, and they moved me here. That was 17 years ago. At the time, I was single, and I was looking for a Shakti, a female Tantra partner. And I was online, and Elsbeth had her profile online, and we met and immediately had this baby. That was 17 years ago, and it was TantraNova. And subsequently, we've been doing this work all over the world with singles and couples and books and tapes and TV, and just love the idea of sharing these practices as a way for people to really get reconnected to their own inspiration and joy in their life.
Great. And Elsbeth?
So very different. I wish I would have had a dad who would have given me a book on sex consciousness when I was a teenager. However, far from it. So you can probably tell that I didn't grow up in this country. I am from Germany and came to the United States when I was 29 years old to do postgraduate work in music. And then from there, I started teaching at a big music school in Boston. That was my, entry when I came here. So anyway, and then I got my doctorate in education. And after that, I moved into management consulting. So that was in the 90s. And after a while, I had gotten really good at the consulting, however, was miserable at relationships. So how it looked for me was that I was attracted to unavailable men. And while this was very exciting at times, most of the time I was alone. And so one day in my despair, like this despair over, will I ever have lasting intimacy and love in my life? I said, okay, if this happens more than once, Elsbeth, with these unavailable men, it must have something to do with me. So that was the entry point for me to really look more and harder at what am I bringing to the table here that eludes me, so I don't have in my life what I wish I would have. So that was the moment when I decided to go to a meditation retreat in the south of France at Plum Village with Thich Nhat Hanh for 10 days. He is this, Vietnamese monk, has a monastery there. And, Carrie, it was excruciating. It was like sitting meditation, walking meditation, eating meditation. I mean, in stillness all the time. I was so confronted with myself, and I couldn't blame, any lover, because there was no lover around. So that was the time, while it was really, excruciating, I left with a huge opening, which was that I got that I'm the generator of my feelings and emotions. That was huge. Shortly after, I decided to apply myself to Tantra more deeply, not just reading books, because I really wanted to get to the ground, to the foundation of what was in the way for me to have in relationship what I wanted. And the first workshop was a huge opening. I decided shortly after to go into a certification program. Never mind, I was still a management consultant. However, that didn't last that long either, because once the opening happened for me, which had to do with clearing distrust that I held towards men without me knowing. And no wonder that this unavailability, had some source in my earlier life, which I love to share a little bit more about later when we go into the healing part of the conversation.
Wow, what a beautiful share.
Yeah. One thing then to close the loop here is with Freddy is that then within 6 months of my tantric studies and opening and healing, Freddy Zental came into my life, and I really attribute it to that clearing, that recalibrating within that allowed me to see him. Like I needed to be in a vibrational state that actually could then attract the man who is and who was right for me then. And so here we are, voila, and you heard his story.
That's right.
It's beautiful. And I resonate with what both of you are saying so much. It's interesting the role that sexuality plays in our self-acceptance, and in our ability to be intimate with ourselves, and then how that reflects in our relationships. And I think that, I recognize my own journey, and I when I look out, when we look out into the world, we kind of see ourselves, right? We generally see what we are experiencing. And so I can't say that this is true for everybody, but I can say that I had a big block with sexuality, and I didn't unblock that until 38, which is like, whoa, like 8 years old was my first orgasm, was my first time that I ever experienced, peace within myself, or enough self-trust, or enough willingness to actually explore my sexuality, that I got to the place where I got the tools I needed to do that. Since that moment, it was like Pandora's box off, and Carrie just went like wild, like, whoa, I just like got to go explore this. So, and now I found my partner, which is really great, and I'm getting to experience that deeper. Sexuality, I recognize it is a really important part of the journey, and it's not one that I think I told you, Elsbeth, when we had our conversation, it's not something that I personally am still comfortable with yet in my own self. Like, I'm exploring it individually and privately, and it's wonderful, and I love my relationship. But I'm not at the place where I could like go teach it. So I really just want to like bow down, honor you guys. You know, that you're both at that place of comfort with yourselves, that you can teach this, because I really think it's one of the most vulnerable awakenings that you can have. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, how did you get to the place where you were strong enough in your sexual practices and your energies and your tantra in order to be able to teach that? Because you know, from my own practice, whatever I teach, I be like kind of a lot deeper in it than anybody else that I'm teaching, because I've got to have that depth and that breadth to be able to bring, and I can hold a container of just come up. So I'm looking at you guys, I'm going, wow, like you can really hold a big container. So how did you, you know, what are some of the ways that you found yourself exploring your partnership and exploring your intimacy with yourself and with each other?
Sure. Well, I'll start that question, answering it. So Carrie, for me, my whole life, upbringing with my father, who's a psychiatrist, I told you, who gave me the book, he was really enrolled in a lot of transformational practices and work. So I was raised around these kinds of practices that we teach now. And I never thought I'd teach it. But when I met Elsbeth and we started our work, she had gone through a 2-year program to get certified to teach this. So I did the same program. And then we created our own brand. And then the 17 years we've been doing this work. And it's always new and different. But what's interesting is that, you know, there are a lot of roads to transformation, but the sexual working with sexual energy is unique in that whether you're doing our workshop or not, when we're in our sexual energy, we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed. Oxytocin's released, endorphin, serotonin. So when we integrate meditation with sexuality, what starts to show up as a default way of listening and being are creativity and pleasure in areas of life that seem completely unrelated to sex. So in our teaching it and holding the space for people to go through whatever process they're going through, when they come in to do the work with us, they do like an intake. So they write out some general information, and what's most important is what they want to get, what makes it worth their while to be at that workshop. And in doing the practices and the integration of meditation, as you know, which is about just being still, just watching the thoughts, the witness. And we have very specific distinctions that we integrate with the sexual practice that allow persons to get in touch very clearly with what is in the way, which is usually ourselves, of creating what we most desire, most deeply really want in our life. And what happens is people get to see that there is a kind of a game that we play with ourselves, you know, and it's kind of just the state of our minds, you know, that the mind is always looking for something to fix, to justify its existence, and the ego never wants to say it's my fault, it's particularly the bad stuff, so there's always something to fix that we could never do anything about. But when we really start getting this work, we get that we're really making the whole thing up, and choice starts to arise. And it's really, you know, we can get that linguistically, and there are a lot of places you can read that, and there are a lot of approaches to saying that. But when you are in the sexual energetic, in that vulnerable, intimate place, in the way that we teach how to be with that energy in some of the ritual practices, you get more deeply connected with what we don't see about what we're creating in our life. And that's the magic of it, or the simplicity of it. And we can get more into that as we go. But that's a space to hold for people. And they really just, I call it a rediscovery of what we already know that we've forgotten.
Let me build a little bit on this with an example from my own healing. So what Freddy opened up here in, you know, coming to choice, particularly in terms of our sexual emotional being, because our sexual emotional being is based on, it's actually quite impulsive. And the impulsivity can go either to being obsessed or being uncontrolled to suppressed. They are two sides of the same coin. So some people are really preoccupied with that energy or with their emotions, or the other way around. The whole thing is that either the emotion or the suppression of the emotion has me, or the preoccupation with my sexual self or the suppression of that has me. I don't have it. So because that, once we go, in order to be, you know, navigate in that realm where I can have my emotions, that is where choice arises. So now in terms of the healing, you know, how is that connected with healing, and how does choice arise? through the sacred sexual healing. So while I didn't come to Tantra to have better orgasms, I already had pretty good orgasms. I expressed myself sexually. That was actually my go-to. For me, it was like the love center that was looking for love outside. And I used the sexual to get the love.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's definitely part of the journey. At least that's part of the journey I experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for many women like that. Not all women, but there are a number of women who, So anyway, for me, while the healing, so there is a beautiful tantric healing ritual that is dedicated to the woman, where the woman is the receiver and the man is the giver, or the partner. It can be same sex, lesbian, or any, of any kind of preference, sexual preference. And so Freddy was not in my life yet. So I did this practice as part of the workshops with a practice partner. And the givers really get trained in how to be present, how to really clear themselves of any of their own agendas. So they leave this outside the room. It's not for their gratification. And if something comes up, if they get triggered, they get trained to breathe through that trigger and let that trigger not interfere with the giving. Now, what that does is it opens a space for the receiver, for me, to just totally receive. There's nothing expected, no reaction on any level, emotional, sexual. The man is not there to that we get it on. It's not about that. So in that ritual, what opened up for me was when I was touched inside my yoni, which is the sexual center of a woman in Sanskrit. There was a memory coming up for me, which had to do with the time when I was 18 years old, first boyfriend, first love, first intercourse, and it was incredibly painful, the intercourse. I had to go to the gynecologist. The bill from the gynecologist went to my house. My dad opened it, and all hell broke loose. So at that time, I felt really alone. I felt not understood. And that was also the time when I made this nanosecond decision that men are never there for you when you really need them. But these are not consciously, designed decisions. So that was the background that was with me into my adult life. No wonder that I attracted unavailability because, I didn't trust and I didn't know about it. So by clearing that, first, of course, experience the pain because it's just like opening a valve, and the physical pain, the emotional pain of the 18-year-old. However, that was also then released, and then through that release, through that clearing, trust arose, like trust in myself, trust in men, and then Freddy Zental came into my life.
Ta-da!
So,
humor is a good thing to break the tension. Here's the thing. This is a really sensitive topic. People's sexuality is a really sensitive thing. I think it's super vulnerable.
Yes.
And I think I've been through a whole spectrum on this. So it's so interesting just to look at my own journey. Like I just did the whole spectrum of it. I feel like, there's ways in which we can be sort of callous or cut off from the experience and sort of just like, engaged in sex for external gratification or for some kind of feeling like validation. It can be, it can be a very intimate thing. It can be a very personal thing. It can be, your heart is open and you're very energetic exchange, or it's all about trust, So it seems like there's like a positive pull and a negative pull. And when I say negative, I don't mean like bad. I just mean, there's a spectrum. So how do you help people, let's say, navigate from if they're in a sort of closed space, maybe they wouldn't even sign up for this kind of thing, if they're really sort of closed off. what's the point that somebody opens to want to kind of do this work, I guess, is a good question.
Sure. Yeah, let me try and add to that question. So Tantra was one of the original yogas of the energetic body. And it's all energy, and we're just a denser form of it, and our emotions have an energy to them. We can think of something in the past and get sad or get happy, and so we can affect the moment. So when you do the actual, so again, like I said earlier, when you're in the sexual energy, we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed. Now when we teach also the development of the belly breath, the conscious breathing, so we're actually using our mind's focus to bring the breath down into the diaphragm and extend the belly, which gives us a little bit of a nano break from the story, the conversation, the churn, right? And then we start to drop into what we call the witness, watching the story, not having any total felt sense of the story, just watching the story. Then we teach how to tap into energy and the awareness of energy, aligned with the fourth piece, our intention, what I want to create, what I want to let go of, what I want to create in my life. Through all of this, working again with the sexual, which leads us right there, and with these distinctions as a really focused practice, people can choose because they see very clearly that they can either stay in this fixed position about whatever is never going to happen and it's always that way and it's always because of so-and-so or this and that, or they can go, I'm going to actually shift that story. It feels better to even believe that story, and now I can start moving towards that story. It's all made up anyway. So the choice starts to show up for people in their own time, in their own way. So we've been doing this for 17 years and with lots of different types of people all over the world, executive people who are not yogis, and they get it. We've really been able to refine our results in the practice.
You know, you have a nice clarity around it that I think creates confidence for people, because you guys are so centered. I mean, I'm just reflecting to you what I see, that you seem very centered and confident in this aspect and neutral. Like, this is just energy. This is just, this is a way to learn about yourself. This is a way to expand. And because that energy is so, the framework seems to be there, like, I would have more confidence, right? I can tell you, this isn't something that I would definitely go and do, because I already told Elsbeth, like, I'm still doing work in this area. I had some stuff. So for me, it stirs up a lot of things and thinking about going to do something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, it stirs things up. And I think I'm not the only one. So that's why I'm bringing this up, because my audience tends to be a reflection of me, right? They're people that are attracted to my energy. So what do you say to people who've maybe had, let's be the guinea pig. What do you say to people who've had like some early childhood things, or some programming around sex and linking it to shame? Because for me, definitely that was a part of my early experience. Like, I wouldn't say I didn't have like specific childhood abuse, you know what I'm saying? But I had this message that area shouldn't, that we don't talk about that, and that we don't explore that, and that is like, it's one of the reasons why I never had an orgasm really until 38. This is the primary reason, right? I was trying to be a good girl. So this comes up a lot for people. Like, somehow, if I do this thing, then I'm treading on a fence. Like, there's a lot of structures and agreements in our society around what is a good girl and what is a bad girl. And then if you explore your sexuality, then, then you're not good. And I think your story, Elsbeth, you probably confronted a little bit of that's on your journey. How does this work help you unweave all of those stories, all that differentiation?
Yeah, of course, it's a progression and an evolution, and I totally trust that when people come, they go to the place that they are ready for. There's nothing to be forced. When we look at the river just flows. So when we go with the river, we'll see things. We come up again, the boulder, and then we move around the boulder, and we don't press towards the boulder because we want to move the boulder, but we can't. So there are three distinctions we work with in terms of tapping into ourselves. So all that has to do with, in the first place, what we share here and in our work and, with ourselves in our own life, is that we are very interested in accessing our life force energy that is sexual in nature. You know, it's like often when we think about sexual energy, it's thought of, oh, that's aroused energy. But we interpret this a little differently, which is that life force energy is sexual in nature, because that's the energy that brought us into this life. It's not good or bad. What it does is bring forth life. So if we could tune with that energy, that we actually befriend it, so that, because that is our sourcing, so that we can use it for our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, our spiritual being. Of course, we can, Freddy always say, you know, we can procreate. I mean, do you want to say that?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, we've been procreating with this energy forever. The last 100 or so years recreating with the development of contraceptives. And what we're teaching is how to co-create with what I call this sexual intelligence. So it doesn't look sexual when we're being in a creative place in our life outside of something sexual, or we're in a pleasurable place outside of something directly sexual. Yet that's the systemic intelligence of creativity, of the existence of now, the existence of being. So when we bring, again, consciousness to the sexual, that starts to show up outside of the sexual in the simple process of living, because we're tuned into a deeper listening. So now when I go, well, you know, hey, my job, 30 more years of retirement, that dog doesn't hunt anymore because it doesn't even feel real to say it, you know. So the shift, you know, from that to appreciation feels much better and more connected. So
this is the first, there are three anchors. The first one is our life force energy, the life force energy center, which is our sexual center right above the pubic bone. We call it the creation center. Then the triangle is then the heart center, where love energy, you know,
resonates.
Yes, thank you. And then the third one is our consciousness and spiritual. And so actually maturing in life has to do with coming into balance of these three centers, or these vortices. And of course, to come into balance, we need to move through what's in the way, what we learned when we were little. And, you know, Carrie, it's not just you in your personal upbringing, individual upbringing, where it may have taken on a certain form around the sexual. It's a collective, you know, so through the world religions, through, you know, so there is quite a bit of work to do to clear not only oneself, but like the space around us, you know, the hemisphere. And although that can only be done one clearing at a time. You know, how can I assist in transforming the world around the sexual spiritual axis if I haven't done my clearing myself?
And, you know, you mentioned earlier, those of us who've experienced some kind of sexual repression or abuse in some way, and that's everybody. I mean, even potty training. I mean, when you're a kid, you know, did you crap? No, you didn't? No, yes, I did. No, you know, that's how we have it, you know, constipation, and it's a huge $1 billion industry. But I mean, I'm making fun, but I mean, the truth is we've all gone through what we've gone through, that we keep spinning oftentimes. It's not to diminish whatever impact those things have had on, or that they were, it's how they live for us now. And when we really get that, we're making up, you know, stuff all the time, and most of it's from the past. So if I had a bad relationship in the past, then I'm going to believe deep down that I could never have a relationship. And even when I get one that looks good, I've got to be right about that it's going to be wrong, because that's been my experience, and we fight for that. And that's what we do. So what happens in these practices as a transformational practices, things don't stop happening. They just don't stick around as long. There's like a developed space from the story making and the feeling and sensation to intention of what we want to create, where we're moving, what we're doing in this moment. And that's what starts to show up for me in my doing this and teaching this, and what I've seen with others as we've taught it to thousands of people.
And there's one more thing I would like to add in terms of like opening to the healing, or we could call it the clearing, because healing doesn't mean that we are sick or there's something wrong. It's just like we think in terms of frequency, you know, the frequency is either off, there may be a constriction, or frequency flows, you know. And so that is, and when we look at that, there's nothing right or wrong. It's just either constricted or not, like it's flowing. So we want to come into this flowing state. And so also, just to take a little bit the edge off here in terms of learning with us, is that, you know, that we start out with tapping into our subtle energy body. Like, how does energy show up for me in my emotions? So we call it, like our foundations workshops are all about tapping into emotional intimacy, which has to do with the heart center, with our consciousness. And so when we are more connected to there within, and if people come as a couple, then, you know, connected with their partner, because that is where also the listening opens up. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we take it to the next level, to the advanced level, where we tap into the sexual center space. And again, there is a lot of listening, and it's not about, you know, jumping bones. It's more like opening up a new realm through listening to sensing, through listening to the masculine, through listening to the feminine, both within and the partner. To me, that opens up, I mean, new worlds, you know. The next day after the healing rituals, when they come back, I mean, there are comments like, for guys, I have never been that close to my wife or to my partner. Or, you know, the woman says, you know, I never felt heard like I was heard last night. So, and then, of course, people bring this into their lovemaking. You know, that embellishes the lovemaking, that brings consciousness to the lovemaking.
So, yeah, the lovemaking expands. And can you imagine, see, for us, we hold it that this sexual enlightenment is really the key to nirvana on earth. Because can you imagine being in this open vulnerability that happens in this sexual energetic as a way of being and listening in your life? With your neighbors, with people you meet in the elevator, with everywhere you go, that you could be so present and so intimately, you know, vulnerable. It's like theater. I do theater. And, you know, for me, the most impacting moments are when I'm very vulnerable and really totally open in front of people I don't even know. Yeah. And that's what they get it. They get it because that's what they want, and that's who they are, and that's our connection that we share. It's all about connection. Ultimately, I mean, in the end, what do we have but connection?
So the only thing that gets in the way of connection is all these stories about how we need to cover, or we need to hide, or we need to contract, right?
Right.
And then when we start to open that up, then discovering a lot of other things that we anticipate discovering. And I view the journey as like, every step that you take on your journey is perfectly fine. It's just whatever you needed to go through in order to learn that experience to get to the next place that you can have the new experience, right? Getting is that this process with you guys is very fluid. You know, it's like, okay, what are you ready for now? What's the next step for you? And it's more intuitively guided. I feel like this stuff is so... all kinds of transformation work, so esoteric in the way that there's not like step 1, step 2, and then we're going to go to step 3 and it doesn't work like that. It's like this web. It's like you're, you know, it's like this thing over here could be causing your foot to have a problem, right? There's a web all around us of all of these, any one thread could pull and it could just release the whole thing. Be patient with everybody, to be patient on your journey, you know, like this, we're talking about a lot of things right now, and it can seem overwhelming, but there's actually like the more it opens, it just sort of knows how it wants to open, right? All energy knows how it needs to open.
Right. I think people, if they just listen to their bliss, follow their bliss. I mean, that sounds so simple and it's such a cliche, you know, and the bottom line is, you know, when we are living in a constant complaint about something in our life and we stay there and we keep complaining about it, there's a story there. you know, and it's kind of, again, I mentioned earlier about the mind and, you know, justifying its existence and having something to fix all the time. And so that's all, you know, okay, we get that semantically. Okay, it's written, it's been said. Okay, I can understand it. And yet, what is it that keeps me doing it? So when I can recognize myself doing that and remember, see, so that's one transformation is linguistically to get something like that intellectually. Another transformation is to get it energetically. And
yeah, energetically.
We teach transformation energetically. So if you start learning how to listen energetically with yoga, the energetics of yoga, just breathing consciously and watching the thoughts within, which then create the reaction, which then give us the results, then we can start to shift our lives to have a happier life, a more fulfilled life, a more authentic hero's journey. And the hero's journey, stop hitting me. She's telling me to shut up now.
Oh, I love it.
But I really love talking about this and love people who may be listening who are getting inspired to do something about their own life and bring what they got, excuse me. You know, so like Elsbeth, she's so in her sweet spot in this work, you know. I mean, she was moving at about 50% of her potential when she was, you know, bopping around the world doing, management consulting, though she was really good at it. This is really what she is meant here to do in the time that she has, that we all have in this life. We have something very special and unique to bring. And the opportunity is to bring that. And that's where it doesn't look sexual in terms of creating life, but that's where the ripples of the love that we love to do, the thing that we do so well, have an effect on the rest of the world. And when we're gone, those effects keep growing and keep experiencing and keep expanding life.
You know, what's so interesting is that I was thinking about people coming in and thinking, oh, well, my problem is with my partner, right? Like they come in and say, oh, I can't relate to my partner. But then as you start to look at the bigger picture, like you said, you do the witnessing, you learn how to quiet and tune in. You might find out that it's really had nothing to do with your partner. It has nothing to do with your job that you're doing, that you go to every day, you know, and that is causing a shutdown, you know, in your energy or your creativity or your passion for life, that then it's coming back home and causing this feeling of dissatisfaction at home and creating, you know, I mean, who knows how it all manifests? There's so many ways, but the only way we're going to find it is if we do some practices to open up, right? To listen in a new way. And I love, Elsbeth, you're talking about the listening part. So tell us more about, you know, how that plays out in the work that you're doing with people, the listening, teaching them to listen.
Yeah, so the opening up really has something to do with deepening my listening to myself first and foremost. And you spoke to that like, it's not really about the partner. The partner may trigger something, but there, you know, maybe something else going on underneath. And by accessing our life force energy, given that it's creative, it will affect every facet of our life. You know, so like I'm physically much healthier now, emotionally too, than I was 20 years ago. And my energy level, my focus, and I mean, what Freddy shared, you know, I'm really in my groove now. I mean, this is like the height of my professional career, or better said, what I'm here to what I came here to do. and so that there was something I wanted to say before, you know, when people coming, you ask the question, you know, because it may be delicate, and when do they know? It's like when they no longer want to tolerate the status quo. And that could be the disconnect from themselves, the suffering. Sometimes it shows up in a physical suffering, the suffering in relationship, like not having the fulfillment they had been dreaming of. And it requires a certain readiness, which I actually think that in any arena where we want to grow, we want to be in a place, or we come to a place where we say, okay, with my resources I have gotten so far, I cannot further expand. I will stay on the same level. And that is where when we reach out to get new input, to get, you know, being guided for a while to, you know, shift our world. And so it's like Einstein said it, I cannot change the world with the same tools or same mindset that I have been living in, because otherwise we already would have changed it.
Right. Obviously it didn't work.
Right.
And we also need to be fearless with moving forward, right? Fearless with trying things and pushing to the edge.
Yeah, so when that willingness, that wish for shifting, no longer tolerating, it needs to boil up a little bit, because that is where we can not only break open, but break through. And that is where, often with velocity, like, woo. And I have come to learn to be really patient with when I talk with people on the phone, they call, or they have a intimacy consultation with me before they ever think of doing any work, and to see where they are at. And some people, may need a little longer. Or there are some people who come to us to say, I've been watching you, I've been following for the last 5 years, and now I'm ready. So this is where we really want to flow with the river and not pushing the boulder into the, street upstream or something.
So do you have people that are primarily in couples, or are they singles? Are they a mixture? And how in every classroom do you everybody at once?
So we have workshops, and then we also do one-on-ones, both with one couple at a time or one person at a time. We have workshops. Our foundations workshop for men and women is couples and singles. And then if someone comes as a single, they get paired up with another single. So we always gender balance. So if there are two women who want to come who are lesbians, they pair up. And then we also I have an all-women's workshop, which is open to singles and married women or in relationship. And Freddy has his men's workshop for men only. It's the same. So there is a lot of, there are a lot of options to choose from. And often women, even when they are in relationship, they want to start out in the feminine awakening essence workshop, because they can really connect with themselves more deeply and listen before they may bring their partner in.
And I'm imagining that there's probably some of that yin, that feminine listening, that receptivity going on for the men as well, learning how to work with that energy.
Right. When men are in just the company of men, there's a different conversation around how we can use the sexual energetic to create more fulfilling relationships and open up to a broader spectrum of emotion. Because that's one of the guys' things is, which kind of breaks where women don't understand. Where men, we're kind of socialized to, keep our feelings to ourselves, don't show too much emotion. The stoic card player, the kid comes to the dad all upset and crying, and the dad says, come back and talk to me when you can be a man. And the little girl comes crying, and he says, oh, baby, what's wrong? So we aren't raised in a way that supports emotion. So that's one of the big breakthroughs for men, to really start to broaden that emotional spectrum. And then there's ways to create community by things that I do incorporate as practices for men, like drum circle and other practices. And there's a very intimate practice that they're given as a homework practice to do it with themselves that works with their sexual energy in between the first day and the second day. So it's a really powerful workshop for men to really start to tune into a deeper level of intimacy with themselves first.
And that is where the list, because we all have estrogen and testosterone, and the balance of that, how that shows up for guys to actually open up to their own vulnerability.
You know what? So I've just been listening to you guys, and I love it so much. And we're getting to the end of our interview time, but I had an amazing experience. I've experienced a range of relationship, and my current partner is so, he's very spiritual, and he's done his own work, and he's done martial arts, And so, that Qigong and yoga and listening and all of these things. And he's very aware of the energy, like you're talking about, the energy of things. That he's very good at listening. Because he's really good at listening, and because I did the work to get really good at listening to my spirit, now it's like, what an amazing experience it is. And I'm sure you guys are experiencing this as well, to have a partner where you're both really good at listening, connection between the energies, and just here's a simple example. I mean, he loves to massage me, which
lucky you.
Because I love being touched. And when he massages me, he finds the spot that hurts, like almost like ESP. Like it's just like, dong, that's the one that hurts. I'm like, yes, that hurts so bad right there. And he knows exactly where it is. He just he just knows me. And it's such a blessing to have a partner like that. So I just think, if you're on the fence about this kind of work, I recommend it highly enough to do what, to explore this option, to try to look into doing this work, because when you open up your heart and you open up and you trust yourself, learn how to listen to your own body, and you start learning how it works, and you learn about it, then your partner actually can also really tune into that too, and you get attract your sacred partner to do this. It's such a blessing. If you want to speak to that, but I think this work is really powerful and needed.
Yeah.
And
expanding the sacred partnership here when you are already in relationship, both attracting the beloved and really being in that circular flow of heart connection, of sexual connection, of spiritual connection, and there are very particular practices that just allow us to drop into that in a nanosecond.
And just to know for your listeners that, in our workshops, there's no group nudity, though there's some very intimate practices that we have designed for people to do on their own in between first and second or third day. So we've created it in a way that meets people at the listening. For most people, that's a more comfortable way to wade into the waters of conscious sexuality. So they can get this work at their own speed, and anybody in a body can get it if they're willing.
I love that. Anybody in a body can get it if they're willing. Wow. And it's worthwhile to get your heart unblocked and your energy going, because, I can feel it, like when and it's a practice, like in our relationship, I can feel when my heart starts, I can feel that onion skin now. I can go, I'm holding, I'm clutching. There's something there. It doesn't feel good because I've had the opening. Then I need to go in and clear that out. By the way, that stuff also influences your thoughts about the person and your perceptions about the person. And so I learned that, when I'm feeling that, if I clear it, because usually it comes along with perceptions that aren't favorable, if I clear the energy on my heart, all of a sudden I look at my husband, I'm like, I love you. It's like back. So, it's maintenance. It's just like brushing your teeth.
Yeah, and to have tools, because we are animals. So when oftentimes that heart starts to close, it's a feeling, a sensation that may be related to something that you're sensing or getting, or something that's happening in your environment or between the two of you. And then we start to spin it with the conversation.
Yeah.
If we could just be still enough to be with that feeling, and then make a request or look, or be still and look, and if there's something to be said or let go of, and just get that the conversations in our head are just going to happen, but not buy into them to perpetuate the total felt sense of that thing, then we would be better off. Sometimes that's what we love about our animals. Dogs are like our spiritual guides. You leave them in the house all day, it's hot, and you come home, they're like, man, it's so good to see you. But a human would be like, what the hell, man? You've been gone all day and it's hot in here.
It's true, that awareness, that, becoming aware. I got to say, this is the best I've ever done a relationship, because I took, 8 years of really intense spiritual development work. I don't want to scare anybody off with that, but it did take me a little while. 8 years of intense work. But and I went through I kissed many frogs. Thank you to all the frogs I kissed. Each taught me something really important. each one of those, chance encounters, or whether it was a month or 6 months or one date. Yeah. But it helped me learn about myself, and I think when you go through that process, when you're willing to commit and do this kind of work, what you have on your side is that you know yourself more, you're more clear, and you can show up with more love for yourself, which means you can show up with more love for your partner. And a sacred partnership it's just, so far, I think is delightful. I'm loving it. I'm so grateful every minute. So, yeah.
That's so
Can't say enough about this work. Let's do more. So, okay, you guys have you have a free gift, Creating Intimacy and Love, a download. Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So we thought, given the conversation, that it would be really great to leave all of you who are watching and listening with now tangible practices. When we say listening to each other, listening to myself, how do I do that? Where do I start? So on that DVD, we teach a couple of practices that you can integrate immediately into your everyday life. One is very short. It's a parasympathetic breathing practice that allows us to come to stillness, where intimacy arises. And the other one is where you listen to your different centers in a gentle way, and where you don't have to be a certain way. It's just noticing, where you connect with your heart center or your throat center or your power center, or, your creative center, and just listen without expectation. So we thought we would leave you with that so that you can take it to another level beyond the conversation.
I love that. Thank you so much for that gift. I want to listen to it. So it's great. Thank you. Well, thank you guys. Any parting words?
Yeah, keep your heart open, because love will find a way. Yes.
Okay.
I love that. I love singing. That's so great. Thank you so much for that. Well, everybody, I hope you got a lot out of today's talk, and that you're motivated and inspired to take the next step on your own journey to, open up your heart more, open up your energy more, and get that juices flowing through your whole being. It's a wonderful thing. So blessings to everybody today, and we'll catch you next time on Soul Nectar. Thank you, Elsbeth.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm good kisses. Do you want to join me in kisses? Here come the kisses. Love you guys. Take care, everybody.